We got JT Brown here. Tyler and I are welcoming you in, and 8-year pro or
something like that.
8-year, 330 games-ish, I think?
350.
350, okay.
Yep.
All right.
They don't count the playoff ones in there, so.
And you started Minnesota Duluth. I remember playing against you. You guys beat us in the Frozen Four, so there's a little bad blood there, but we'll put that aside. I guess let's start with your experience there. You win the national championship. You're heavily relied on. I remember you there. You were a pest to play against, but you put up 25 goals almost, I think, which is really impressive at the college ranks. So let's just talk about your experience there.
It was awesome. I think just going to Minnesota Duluth was great for my development in hockey, and then on top of that, obviously winning does help. And when you go to a school, I think the one good thing about Minnesota Duluth too versus some of the other schools, like hockey was the #1 sport. That was the focus. So I think for me as a player going there, it was pretty awesome just to be able to kind of live that experience where, University of Minnesota, where you got the football, you have Notre Dame, you have all these other bigger schools, Wisconsin, where maybe another program's kind of the top dog to say. But it was really fun, and I enjoyed the time there.
Yeah, and then obviously, like you said, like winning obviously helps. So like that national championship, you were in Minnesota too. So you guys, I remember playing that final game. I think I got 3 penalties, and they scored on 2 power play goals. I apologize to all my Notre Dame teammates. I let the boys down there, but that game was crazy. I mean, you guys had a great team, and winning in Michigan, that had been extra special. Or Minnesota had been extra special.
Yeah, so being in the backyard, 2.5-hour drive, I think it was just sort of a match made to be, we were playing at the XL Energy Center, so like even when playing pro, it was weird kind of going back into that building. You still remember our celebration, but we had a really good team that year, and even the following year in Duluth that we didn't win. But I think that winning mentality or learning how to win and doing that in the with UMD definitely helped growing up and going in the pro ranks, because you know what it takes to win and how hard it is to win.
For sure.
I got to play in a Calder Cup, like an AHL finals, lost. Been in a Stanley Cup final and lost, and like it's hard to do. It's hard to get to that point. You may never get back there again. So to even just have that, that moment, that winning moment, and to see what it took to get that far, I think was something that I cherish.
And like obviously, I mean, your dad is quite the football star too. So did that help a lot too with that transition into university? I mean, he was so good at NC State, and then I mean, for you were so good at Duluth. I mean, did you rely on him a lot in those years to kind of be like, okay, like this is my chance now. Like, how do I go about this? Or
yeah, so I think he was it was good for me to have him be a professional athlete, and just sort of what it took to get to that level, to be the highest at his sport. And for me, trying to attain that, try to get to the NHL, try to be one of the best players in the world. A small percentage of the hockey players are going to make it. So just relying on him more from that sense. Growing up in North Carolina and playing in North Carolina with football, hockey wasn't his forte, so he wasn't drawing up X's and O's for me in the hockey world. But I think the one thing I took from him as well was he always just preached to me about my work ethic. He just said, I don't always know the X's and O's of hockey, but I can tell when you're not working hard out there. So yeah. For me, that was the one thing that always was in the back of my mind, is I know that I can control how hard I work. So I think, that's just one thing that he instilled on me, even though he wasn't, a hockey player, and it was just different sports.
I think that's so important for especially kids coming up to learn, to understand like the work ethic, teamwork, like body language, like attitude towards the game when things aren't going your way. Like I think those things are so almost beyond this, because you get to the level that in the NHL or in the Division I college ranks, like everybody's so good, and it's like who can set themselves apart in those little ways. Who can? I think even talking about your NHL career, like you come out of Duluth as probably heavily relied on to score and play that kind of role, and then you get to the NHL ranks, and now all of a sudden every guy had that same kind of career before they get there. So it's like, how do you find your way to stick, right? So I think, playing against you, we played against each other for some of those series, Tampa versus Detroit and some of that. And I just noticed like your game, you were like, I don't want to say agitator, but you were hard to play against. You're willing to block a shot. You're not the biggest guy, but you're willing to scrap anybody, and you're bringing crowd to their feet. You're energetic. So where did that mindset change, and kind of how did that process go?
I think you said it perfectly, that at some point every player that has made it to the NCAA, whether it's AHL or the NHL, they were the best players on their team. So there's always going to end up being somebody that maybe they have more skill, they have more of this, but I could control how hard I worked and what I wanted to do. And I think for me, the end goal was to stay in the NHL. So when I first got my call up, I got to play. It was awesome, right out of college, but go to play a year in the American League, and when you finally got that full chance in the NHL, it was like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make it stick, whether, like you said, blocking shots, being the energy guy. I just knew that my goal was to play in the NHL, and Tampa had a really good team. They had a lot of really skilled players, and it sort of transformed my game into more of a, even though I feel like I always had that, I'd love to go hit people. I love that side of the game. Obviously, you can't fight in college, but kind of change the mindset of just what were the things that the team needed me to do for me to stick into that position. And it stuck for a long time. That was, a big reason why I stayed for as long as I did in the places I did, is because I just did whatever the team needed of me. And if that meant changing my role and, being less offensive and trying to just, get the pucks in deep when you need to, as cliche as it is, and try to run somebody through the boards. I mean, again, I think it was just more of that team aspect and just wanting to do whatever I could to stay.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think it's all just, it's versatility. It's so important in life to be able to, get out of your comfort zone and try something new. And for you, unfortunately, going from a goal scorer to a different role guy, that's kind of getting out of your comfort zone. That's different. That's fun, though. You can look back and be like, I did this, and I think now you can be like, I'm now a TV color analyst. From national championship to, a very good career in the NHL to now, still in the game, amazing. But how did that go? Was that obviously the Twitch background, or kind of give us some insight to that?
Yeah, it was strange. So I had gotten a call from my agent, and he just asked me. I was in Sweden last year playing in the Allsvenskan League, and they're just like, hey, would you think about retiring to be a color analyst for Seattle, that the new team that they were looking? They asked if it was something you'd be interested in, and I'd never really thought about it. I never thought that, hey, when my playing career is done, this is what I want to do. I just don't think that, I guess most players don't have that conversation with themselves or with their family until it's read that time. So I hadn't really kind of thought too much about it. And at that point, I did a mock broadcast with John Forsland while I was in Sweden. It went well, obviously, since we're here.
Is that awkward? Or was it weird?
It was very strange because we're doing it on Zoom. I'm in Sweden. It's the time change. With John was in North Carolina at the time. Then it was also being broadcast back to Seattle. So there's just a lot of moving parts and just never calling a game. You've listened to how many people call games over the course of just watching, and it's just weird to kind of do it yourself for the first time. And I'd say it's almost really like my first real interview.
Yeah.
Never did the the draft where you go talk to all the teams, where that might have been the first interview. This was really the first time, I feel like it's a job interview for me. So this was just a weird, obviously I think I did okay afterwards. John had good things to say, and if that's the first time, where can we go from there? And I think obviously I did a good enough job.
How did that develop, though? You're still playing and your agent thinks of you, you obviously have a personality that he sees as being a potential candidate for it, or whatever it may be. How do you think you got that opportunity? Is it just kind of, you said you never really talked about it before, right? So
yeah, so I'd say, I think, obviously we do plenty of interviews, so I think that, has something to do with it. I think, just the climate of being in Seattle as well and being a little bit more outspoken, I think that also maybe draws, a little bit of attention to why they chose me as well. But I also just think too, my agent was good about just, looking at that next step, not necessarily always just about, the hockey side of things. What do you want to do moving forward? This could be a really good opportunity for you. You could go play a couple more years in Sweden or Germany or however the case may be, wherever it is. Or do you want to kind of start looking to the future and what you can do long term? And sort of just having those conversations with my agent, having them with my wife, we decided that it was the best decision to retire and sort of kind of look into that next chapter of, life. It's always about hockey for a hockey player. That's the one thing that always is on your mind. But to be able to stay in the game, I think, is a big part of why that decision was made too.
Yeah, and I think we've had a couple NFL guys who. It's about that next step, but if you're not thinking about that next step before it comes, you get there and it's just like, well, what do I do now? And like Joe Hawley, he said he lost football, which was his true love for how many years? And to be able to stay in the game, I think is so nice to just have that foundation. And I saw something today and I wanted to bring it up. So you pledged your brain to science, which I find remarkable. Obviously the hockey world, the football world, there's so much more coming about CTE and all that. How was that decision? Obviously it was Ben Lovejoy's influence as well, but that's impactful. Like that's incredible. So kudos to you, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think we talked about it too a little bit, just let's say the style of game that I played, the amount of the hits, the fights, against different opponents. I have documented concussions as well. So, I think in the form of science and also trying to better our game in the future, to me it was an easy decision for me to want to donate my brain. Unfortunately, that's the way we figure out, about CTE, and everything else is after you've passed. Obviously, it'd be better if we could find a way to have more information about it while you're still living. But I think if that's something that I can pass on, the information from, how I played, the different concussions that I had, and just to see, what they can gain from that scientifically, when I'm gone, eventually, hopefully it's a long way down the road. But, I think that was the right decision to do as well.
Do you do anything now to be like kind of, I don't think proactive is the right word, but just like you understand that you put your body through this toll of being a professional hockey player, and now it's like kind of, you focus on your health and do any kind of like brain training or like things to stay a little sharper. I think even just your job right now requires you to be on the ball. Like you're thinking on your feet, you have to talk while you're watching a game and make it compelling to an audience. I think that in itself is something, but anything else?
I don't know. I'm gonna say video games. I feel like, I don't know, it's weird, but like when we do the concussion tests and different things, there's times where I've even had to say, I'm not ready, even though I'm able to pass the computer test. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the video games that I play, and that my brain is used to seeing patterns and recognizing things and clicking different buttons. So, I'd say that. But like you said, talking during the game, I'd noticed, just mentally how on you have to be during a game versus playing and getting ready, and the notes that are taken. I think it's more of a mental change than it's obviously a physical change being on the ice. I think there's just those little things, obviously trying to make sure you get your right sleep, eat as well as I can, even though I don't have the greatest eating habits, but I think it's just more just being aware of yourself and of what's going on around you and how you're feeling mentally, and just making sure there are times where you need breaks and you need to kind of just decompress and relax a little bit. So just trying to be in tune with my body as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's so valuable. You just touched on it, but decompressing and taking breaks. You played for how many years? It's so go, go, go. And sometimes you feel like a robot. I have no idea what you guys felt like in the NHL, but at the end of the day, it's tasking. Emotionally, mentally, physically, and the real reason we had a group chat, and I saw your tweet on Bell Let's Talk, and I was like, okay, Riley, this is perfect. This is right in your backyard, and obviously your tweet, I think, was so impactful in a way that, a lot of people don't think about, because at the end of the day, medication is that's something that is scary to say, I take medication, it's something that I think more for obviously the male audience, but my girlfriend takes it, I have people around me who take medication for their mental health and for their, ADHD, and that's something that, a lot of people have a hard time doing. So, I just wanted to even just touch on your tweet. Doing something like that is also challenging, to put that out to the world. This is me, being vulnerable, but at the end of the day, it can impact so many people. So, how was even just the response from a simple tweet like that?
The response was really good. I wasn't really expecting, I guess, a negative response, but at the same time, overwhelming support. Even from looking back at the tweet and the previous, Bell Let's Talk and trying to raise awareness, there's been times where I've written this out before. Like I've thought about, or if it was, like a Players Tribune type thing, just trying to write it, but I didn't do it. And I don't know why. Maybe it just wasn't the right time for me. And I feel like when you get to that point, you decide that it is the right time. You just know when it's the right time to speak about something. And I won't say it's not that you weren't comfortable, but I think that, for this one, I just knew that it was the right time to put this tweet out, or however it was, whether it was a story or just a tweet. I just wanted to talk about it and to, hopefully can help impact somebody else, because I know I've sat there in front of the computer and had the story written up or typed it out and said, here's my story. And then, you just hit save, and then, it wasn't the right time. So for me, I just kind of, I'm comfortable with it, and it's part of who I am. And I think also, just knowing and being okay with that, I think it's the other part of it. You have to learn to, there are reasons why, some of the anxiety and depression, and it's not just you. And there are things that can help you manage that. And I think that that's just one thing that you said for guys in general, for men, for also people in the Black community where it's just very stigmatized and people don't want to talk about it. If I can talk about it and help one more person talk about it, I think, that's how you continue to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and I think, you hit the nail on the head there, but even for me, like seeing DeMar DeRozan come out and talk about his mental health, seeing, Jonathan Drouin take some time, seeing these athletes, these influencers who you think just have it all, in some respects, you grow up thinking these people are heroes. I remember when I met Sidney Crosby a couple years ago, I was like, this is like literally my hero. But after 5 minutes, I'm like, this is also just a normal human being. Like he's just, he's got a life. Like this is, and so to see that, it was so good for me, because it was like, okay, well, why am I not, following in their footsteps? Why am I not taking care of myself first? Why am I not having these conversations? And I think, that's ultimately why we're doing this. It's definitely about getting comfortable being uncomfortable, but now it's just like, this is so refreshing. And I know that even for me, there's new perspectives that come out of every conversation that I just don't even think about before. And it's just like, wow, you're so right. But this just comes from literally just shooting the shit and having a meaningful conversation, because we can. Why not? Well,
I think that's another thing too, is like when you make it, you finally turn pro, it's like, man, I made it. This is it. This is perfect. You've done everything you wanted to. It's like, well, why am I still sad? Or why is this happening? And you think that just because you made it in your sport or the one thing that you love, that all of a sudden, nothing's going to be wrong. There's going to be no problem. So I think, whether that's, doing individual therapy, sports psychology, seeing the right people, like just because you've made it doesn't mean that everything's just going to go away. You still have to find ways to manage that and to deal with the things that are going on in your life. And it took me a while to figure that out as well, to kind of get to that point where, you talk to a therapist, you have somebody that can, even if it's just a regular conversation, it's just nice sometimes to be able to have that conversation. And it's a no judgment zone. They've seen everything that you've gone through and more, when, sometimes you don't know whether your siblings or your friends would understand what you're trying to talk about or what you're going through, because, they see you playing in the National Hockey League and it's like, well, you have everything. How can you still have this going on? It's like, not that I believe that that's how your family and friends always think, but that's how you think about it in your mind.
Well, everybody looks at something through different lens, right? Like,
exactly.
I think, like you said, you hit it on the head, where when you talk, like if it's to a therapist, you start to just, it's almost like the therapist isn't even there. Like light bulbs start going off in your head, and it's like, oh man, like no wonder I've been feeling like this. There's been so much pressure on me, almost, like I can't control it, and I'm just putting it on myself. And then you start to talk about it, you get it out, and it's so therapeutic. So it's totally right. But I'm curious. So you said after years struggling off and on with depression and anxiety, like, do you think, like on and off, like was there certain things that would trigger it? Was it hockey related? Like, we talked about it earlier. I found for me, like when I got to the NHL, it was like, wow, I'm here. This is amazing. I'm playing with some of the best players, some of my idols. And then the grind continues, and then it's like, okay, now it's kicking in. Like I really have to be on my game. Was that similar for you?
Yeah, I'd say hockey definitely had a it played a part into it, the different stressors of, I mean, you just look at the travel, moving from place to place, having to play. But, then I also think about the role that I did play and how that affected my mental health, whether that's, you're not playing every game. You want to play every single game. You want to be, hell, you want to score the goals, or you want to do this, but you're scratched today, or you haven't played for 4 or 5 games, and how that can wear on you when, you're putting in as much effort as you can in the off season throughout the year, and you're not playing, or you get to play 30 to 40 games in the season. So I think, that up and down roller coaster ride of, in the lineup, out of the lineup, and how that can affect, a player as well in their mental health.
Yeah, this is only junior hockey, but I'll relate it to the NHL. Even for my year in Humboldt, I some nights played 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then you come into the room after a big win, and you got to be this guy. You got to be this dressing room live heart, ready to go, make sure everybody's laughing, make sure everybody's having a good time. And I remember my time in Humboldt, I literally had a 4-day span where I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to quit. I need to go home. I'm not of value here. And I literally went mute for 4 days. And it was a case of, I had all of our leaders come up to me, what's going on? We need you back. What can we do for you? We'll get you more ice time. And I think that reassurance, was so refreshing. It was just okay, I am appreciated here. I'm not, as much as I don't go score a goal every night, I still have a role in this team. And I look back on that journey, and those conversations I had with my leaders was yeah, okay, this is needed. I need this. And even after the accident, once I started having conversations with my parents, and this transitions to me into my next question with you. Being a dad now. It's obviously you have 2 young ones, but I'm so transparent with my parents now. Still reluctant at times, but now it's just this switch clicked, and it's just why are we not expressing our, why we're not being transparent, why we're not being vulnerable. My mom and dad have a crazy story. They both, looking back, and I would have never known if I didn't start asking questions. And I want to know how valuable do you find it to be transparent with your kids? Obviously, they're young. I'm not saying you got to have full-on conversations with your 3- and 5-year-old every day, but I think, I'm sure you see it from a new light now, where it's okay, this vulnerability and this transparency with my emotions my kids can look back and be this was nice, this was healthy, this was good for my mental health growing up as well. So,
well, I think if I can be vulnerable with my kids and show them my vulnerable side, right, and talk about whether it's mental health or inclusivity, or everything else that comes in, I want to bring as much to them, so that when the time does come, if something's wrong, that they do want to come to me, because I've already shared my experience with them. And like you said, 3 and 5, they're not really listening to me. They're just paying attention to what's on YouTube or their little tablet. But that's the way I look at the parenting, and how I want them to grow up and to have that relationship where I'm okay to tell them anything. My life story is an open book. If they want to know, I want to be able to tell them every single part of that. But then at the same time, giving that confidence and that trust that they want to be able to have that same type of relationship with me, where they're open about what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, I noticed you had I guess we can loop this all in together, because I want to hit on your relationship with your old man too, about your article, the Why I Raised My Fist. I think I'm going to read, I think it was the opening paragraph, and I'm going to read it. It's a little bit long, but we read it, and it was kind of gave us a holy shit. We had the chills. So I'll read it quick, and we can talk about it. But on October 7th, 2017, I had a choice. I could shut up and play hockey, or I could do something so loud that the entire hockey community would hear me. Nothing will ever get accomplished if we all keep our heads down and our mouths shut. So during the national anthem in Sunrise, Florida, I raised my fist to protest police brutality and racism. The same fist that got arenas to their feet while exchanged blows with outweighed opponents. The same fist that shattered from blocking a shot during the Stanley Cup playoffs. The same fist that has given countless daps to Black and Hispanic kids in the community while teaching them how to play hockey. I have always sacrificed for my team, for the fans, for my community. In 2017, I had an opportunity to sacrifice for something bigger than hockey, and I knew that I needed to do it. So we read that and we were like, oh man, especially when you talk about you put into perspective what you go through as, you as a hockey player. And I think for me, it was almost, I was reading, I was getting a little teared up. I want to talk about like your activism with the Black community, and we were even saying it was hard for us to formulate questions because it's so like we've never dealt with that. And I think in hockey, like we push aside initiating these conversations because it's uncomfortable for us. So I guess my first question for you would be, how do I go about, if it's educating myself or acknowledging these issues and kind of taking your side and listening to you about it, and like where do you think my first step would be as a white kid? I didn't even really, growing up, I don't think I ever really played with any Black hockey players, and I was just absent to all these issues. So where do you think the first steps are taken for someone like me and a lot of other players around the league?
Well, I mean, you're doing it right now. That right here's the first step, is just having that conversation. If you know somebody, or in a way that you want to ask the questions about what's going on or how we can go about it. As far as educating, there's a lot. I mean, on the internet is one thing, but I think the best way for me in education is through the experience. Like, I'm not an expert on everything either, but I also am an expert on my lived experience through everything, especially through hockey and what I've gone through. And I think the important thing is that we do start just having these conversations and can ask, and it's okay not to know, or it's okay that you haven't played with a Black player, or you grew up somewhere where there's not a lot of Black people. I just think the first thing is being comfortable enough or open enough to be uncomfortable in the situation to ask those questions. And I think that's where it starts, and we all end up, and when we have the conversation, we're the same people. It's just, we just haven't had different lived experiences through that, and just being open about it. And, as far as raising the fist, I think, for me it was important because at that time it was more in football with Colin Kaepernick and everything that was going on there, and there wasn't much being said in hockey. And for me, I also thought about being a father, having a kid at the time and wanting to change the world and have something she'd also be proud of me. She make the world a little bit better place for when she gets a bit older. And also the other kids that, are looking up to their idols, and there's nothing being said in the hockey world. Well, I wanted to make sure that the hockey world heard them, that they were hearing some of the issues that they were going through outside of hockey. Obviously there's still issues inside the game, but that was one that I felt like I could, make a statement. And regardless of how it was going to go down and what was going to happen, I knew that it was the right decision for me. But I think, just again, going back to the conversation part, I think this is the best way about it. I remember, during George Floyd's, when George Floyd's incident happened, I had a lot of people reaching out to me and asking me about it, or what I thought about this, or just saying, hey, I had no idea, I just was oblivious to it. And, being able to just open up and talk to them about, what I've gone through, what, other players that I know have gone through, and, just people in general. I think, being able to sit down and just listen to and have that conversation goes miles to being able to actually, put a foot in somebody's shoe, to be able to see what they've gone through. And not that it's going to change who we are. You guys are all good people. But I think, just being able to add to that another layer because you've sat down and you've had that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, even when we read the article, I mean, just reading it, it's just, I just have so much respect for you, for obviously what you did. I mean, that, and continue to do. I mean, that representation of that fist, I mean, the way you articulated that is just, I mean, it's in a way that a lot of people don't think about, and I think it's just so incredible to see the way that you've, you just want positive change, and you just want positive impact, and especially in a sport that needs it. I mean, even this quote, I mean, understanding where and how you fit in can be lonely, and it fundamentally shapes you as a person. I mean, just to even as I read that, let that sink in and let the chills go through my body, just because, I mean, I would have no idea. I truly, I can't even fathom, reading some of the things that you had to go through. So, I mean, even, hearing that quote again, I mean, what does it bring up, to now be able to say, I am a TV cover analyst for the Seattle Kraken, and I'm doing good, and I'm a damn good father, like.
It's different. It's a weird feeling, you're trying to figure out. I think the best way for me to describe too is I didn't really notice that I was the only Black person on the team for a while until you start to get older. As you're young, you don't really notice those things. It's not really on your mind. And then as you start to grow up and you start to kind of keep going further in your hockey career, or whether it's, you know, things are being said on the ice, you start to kind of realize like, hey, I might be the only person in, you know, my little area. And all the teams we play, there are a couple times where I've played with, you know, other black players, and it was also at the same time like gave you almost a sense of belonging, you know, being able to play with somebody who looked like you and that kind of had that same experience. So it's definitely a weird situation, but I think, you know, me being a color TV analyst, it also helps me, or helps with the representation. It's also showing that, hey, you know what, whether you love hockey, but you also like broadcasting, like there's a spot for you here. There can be a spot for you. I look at what Seattle's done as far as, you know, the diversity throughout their organization. There's spots for you in places in hockey, whether it's playing. We're obviously trying to grow the game and to continue to get, you know, the best NHL players as possible. You can see, I mean, it was Quinn Byfield just scored the other day, his first goal. Like, you know, seeing that as another representation, but then, you know, to be able to, on the other side of the representation that's not actually on the ice anymore, still, you know, giving people something that they might want to look up to, or, you know, try to be that person for them, even though it's not playing the game anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Because like we all know, it's so hard to get to the league, and then you pile on. I mean, maybe you lose your opportunity, and then you still have that passion for the game, and now it's like it shouldn't just be you're done. Like there's no
We're gonna
space.
move on,
so.
for sure. And there's plenty of, I mean, whether it's in all different, you know, diverse communities, there's a lot of barriers in hockey, just even for everyone, when it comes to the cost of equipment, the ice time, and everything that goes into this sport, versus you look at some of the other major sports on how easy it is to pick up, you know, a basketball and just go to the park and shoot around. You start finding there's so many barriers and people get in late, and that's why, you know, the programs where it's whether it's learn to skate, or, you know, just getting the equipment, getting people on the ice. Because what I've found is usually most places, they're like, I've never heard of hockey, don't watch it, don't do anything, and then all of a sudden you get them on the ice, and
They love it.
it kind of sucks at first, because, you know, they might be a little bit older. Say it's an 8-year-old, and it's not fun to fall down at 8. It's not fun to fall down at 3, but you get back up, it's a little bit different, and by the end of it, they love it. Every time you go into the classroom, they were talking to you about the game that happened last week, or did you see this and that, and, you know, to see that transition from I've never seen hockey, never played it, never watched it, to the smiles coming to the rink every day. Those are the instances why, you know, the outreach and trying to do as much as you can in the community to help grow the game. You know, that's what it's all about, is that smile.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that smile is just huge, and I think even, you know, not to relate it to me or anything, but even when I went back and played after the accident, my mom, she said, you know, I saw you smile for the first time. And it's just like something like that. But I mean, I want to, obviously this past couple of years has been tough. I mean, I can't imagine for the black community. I just, you know, can't even fathom how this lasts with COVID, with, you know, with what's going on. Has this really given you time to, you know, I guess reflect? And I mean, allow that, I guess, that personal growth journey to begin, to you know, to start recognizing how much you had to deal with growing up, and how much, you know, you still unfortunately have to deal with. I mean, was there a time during, I guess, these past couple of years where it was like that real reflection period where it was like, wow, you know?
I would say probably the biggest reflection period was sitting down and trying to write that piece, you know, just kind of reflecting on different things that, you know, I had gone through, and then trying to somehow articulate it in the right way that, you know, try to let everybody understand, but also, you know, get my point across, I think. But I think the hardest part about the last couple of years and the positive strides that I guess were made, I think, in the NHL, when, you know, there was a whole bunch of people, you know, talking about it, tweeting about it throughout the NHL, is that, you know, things continue to happen. So it's hard to continue. You want to be optimistic with everything that's going on and the positive steps, but then it's always the one step or two steps forward, one step back, and trying to, you know, not lose sight of those positive steps that we, as hockey as a whole and as the NHL too, have taken.
Yeah. Did you find when you were writing that article, I suggest anyone who's listening to go read the article, because some of the stories you told in it were crazy hockey-wise. The one about your minor or your youth hockey team, that was crazy to me. And then even just things that happened to you outside of hockey, like were those moments that you look back on and like you kind of finally acknowledged and were like you got to think about them, or like I feel like when something like that can happen, it's almost like you just sit on it and you kind of don't really understand. You don't forget about it, but you just push it aside. Did any of that happen, or was it kind of like therapeutic for you to put this out?
Yeah, I would say it was good because a lot of them I haven't talked about. I think I had talked about the hockey story a few times, but
maybe tell the hockey story just quickly.
Yeah, so when my youth hockey days, we were playing a game and one of the players used the N-word on the ice at me, and obviously I came back to the bench upset. My coach, what's wrong? And I kind of told him. They brought the ref over. They told him the situation, said that, this, I didn't hear it. I couldn't do anything. There's no penalty. And my coach took our team off the ice. Said we're not playing anymore. We forfeited the game. And, for me, that's a defining moment in my hockey career because not everybody gets that moment. Not everybody has, their team forfeit. They might just go through the rest of the game upset, mad, however it works. But that showed me that they cared not only about me as a person, but that I belonged in the sport. And who knows if that never happened, if I become JT Brown, the former NHL player, now TV color analyst, because I might have given up on the sport. I don't know. You don't know how many situations that a player may go through like that before they just say, I've had enough, I'm done. And I just think about, the players that weren't in my shoes, that didn't have that same support system that I had growing up with the team that I played with. So that was one that I've constantly kind of reflected on because I feel like that did help show me and help make me want to keep pushing for this game because I do love this game. There's so many positive things and good things about the sport of hockey, as we all know. So, trying to find those positive things, but also at the same time change some of the things that we need to change within the hockey culture. And as far as like, the high school story, which they can read.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever really thought about that one again. Like I think, bringing that back up, it's just one of those things you just kind of push down. You just said, all right, well, that's just another instance and we're going to do what we can. We're going to be strong. We're going to move past it. And I think, being able to, again, like you said, therapeutic, write everything down, just kind of go through. Like, again, that's paper, or the story was a lot longer too, and you have to kind of compress and figure out what's going in. But I think, just writing everything out, even to what I do now, I still write.
Yeah.
Whether it's today we had a bad travel day. You know what I did? I wrote it in my notebook because I have it down. Like just writing things down can be
positive or
such
negative,
a positive,
right?
Whether it's a good thing or a negative thing. I keep a notebook just so I have it.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely helps. And I think before I would have just let everything kind of go underneath. And now you just write the good, the bad. Doesn't have to be daily, doesn't have to be weekly. It's just kind of just to jot things down. And I think it definitely helps with yourself and your mental side of things.
No, I agree for sure. Especially like you obviously know as a father, and I just had our baby about a month ago, and or we just had our baby. I didn't have the baby. But yeah, like writing about your experiences, I think can be so cool, especially like when you can look back on them, and then it gives you an opportunity to really feel into what you felt at that time. And I think, like you said, positive or negative, you can kind of understand yourself a little better, and then when a similar occasion or similar situation arises, you're a little more well prepared to deal with that time. So
yeah, I just think it has a lot to do with being aware with everything that's going on around you. And I think that's one thing that I've used that's helped me, and whether or not I can call it a journal, but a daily whatever, write down like, hey, New Year's Eve, I got a graphics card and I was super happy about it. I'm like, maybe I should go get a lottery ticket too because I'm lucky. Like, I just felt like that's some way, way for me to not do that anymore. Not to just let everything, whether it's good, bad, the ugly, like, don't push it down. Be happy, write it out, and that's all you have to do about it.
Yeah, I think we're so good, as athletes, as men, to just obviously push it down, bottle it up, and I think I now have such a newfound appreciation for the journey aspect of it. The fact that, this is an everyday thing. This is tomorrow's a new day. As much as it's as it's tough sometimes to just want to sit back and let everything go, but you just can't. Sometimes you're like, I don't want to. I'm good. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm okay. But your last even 5 years, you know, being a dad with everything going on. I mean, I hope that you look in the mirror and I hope that you're proud of yourself for like even the small steps. And I think that's another thing I really find the appreciation for now is just those small steps. You know, the fact that you can wake up and write in your journal and think to yourself, I wouldn't have done that before. I would have completely overlooked that. And I mean, now it's just like, I think it's just so important to appreciate those small little things.
Well, once you have kids, you definitely understand it's a journey part. No, I agree. I think it's awesome, and I think that, you know, having kids and being able to recognize the steps and the little steps, I think that for me was a huge turning point in growing up, you know, figuring things out along the line. For me, that was a big part of it, and you'll see as you go, like it goes quickly, right? Like they always say that, you know, how fast they grow up, but just, you know, even from my side of being able to have those good notes, those bad notes, whatever the case may be, and maybe you look back 3 years from now and you're like, hey, Lily, you remember this is what you were doing. I mean, now we all have phones for the pictures and everything else, so I'm sure they're gonna hate some of the photos that they have, but you know, it's definitely a journey and it's a process. And you know, if you're in the sports world, it is a journey from the time you decide that, you know, hockey's what you want to do or whatever the sport is. You know, it's not, you don't get to turn the page and just go to the next day and be like, all right, here we are, we're in the NHL. It's a process, it's the journey, and I think as athletes, we know that the best.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh man, JT, I could just sit down and I'm like, why are we not pouring the beers? Can we just? I mean, yeah, I think what you're doing, I mean, you inspire me, and I mean the fact that, you know, I take it back to the fist. I mean, that representation of the fist is something that I think I'll forever look at, and just, you know, my perspective has changed thanks to you, and I mean, I can't say enough just for what you're doing. I mean, we don't get Seattle games much, so I'll have to start finding a new streaming service to listen. And but yeah, I mean, this is incredible. I mean, Riley, I don't know if you got it.
I mean, I appreciate you coming out here and talking with us, and I just think you're a perfect example. Like, I mean, your career was a great career, but I mean, I think just us two being in similar roles, we know we're not the ones that are getting the most glorifying hockey attention, but I think what you're doing with everything you're involved in and building yourself and having a following, and I mean, just being a great example, I think it's really admirable. And yeah, I mean, I look forward to seeing you more around on the road. I know we haven't really got to talk much, but I think this was a good icebreaker, and just a pleasure having you.
Well, I'm happy. I was happy to be on. I was glad, you know, I got the message and asked if I wanted to join. I was all up for it. So I thank you guys for having me on.